Yeah. Good morning.
Tell me when you're
Thank you all for coming so early in the morning, and appreciate your attendance, and also wanted to make this an open conversation. So if you guys got any questions about anything I'm saying, anything as far as on the slides and stuff like that, please stop me and we can talk. Also, I'll hang around here afterwards, and if you want to talk, and then you can always find me. I'm selling my book collection over in the vendors area. Okay? My name's Tisoncik, and so what? You know. So I've been in the hobby for about 30 years, and Pete asked me to talk, and I've given diorama talks, and I've given figure talks and stuff like this. He says, well, why don't you talk about the masters? I'm a 4-time master over those 30 years. I've kind of been at it for so long, I think some people take sympathy on me, and they say, let's give him something so he gets out of the way. So what I'm going to kind of talk to you today is about something that is very subjective. You know, I mean, we talk about AMPS judging and the analytics going on in there. I do a lot of figure painting, which is very subjective. And I look at masters category as kind of a combination of the two, something that's subjective and something that's also analytical. So what I'm going to try to do is give you guys some pointers on how I went about evolving my style, evolving different things, challenging myself, etc. So I'm kind of going to do that and show you some of the things that appeal to me. All that means is that's my opinion. You know, you could talk to another, you could talk to Pete, you could talk to you know, the guys here. Everybody's got a different perspective on it, right? So I'll look at a model and I'll say, God, that is a gorgeous model, and you know, it gets a silver or it gets a bronze, something like that. So to me, it's very frustrating to see how much variation there is in that. But consistency is one of the things that I do after 30 years of doing this, so I must be doing something right. All right? So what I'm going to start with is we're going to have 4 components to this master discussion. And one is going to be armor. Obviously, that's where we're here today for that. Second component is going to be figures. Why? Because armor figures always aspire to do figures, and there's a good reason to do that. It's because they do add to your model. It's another subtle type of element. Then the third class is vignettes. Okay, well, I did my armor, I did my figure. Now how the hell do I display that? And I'm going to kind of go through some of the standard types of approaches for displays. And then finally, lastly, is probably the most complex and difficult piece, which is the diorama. And that is the one that has eluded all of us for so long in terms of the storyline, the groundwork, all of that good stuff. And you'll see a lot of variation in terms of dioramas out there. So I'm going to try to give you some points, and I'm going to use my stuff that I built. Some of them I got pictures of, some of them I don't, but I'm going to kind of demonstrate and criticize my stuff, okay? All right. So let's go through the diorama. So this is a nice example. We're going to start simple. In my talk, it's always going to go from simple to complex. And so in this particular piece this is one of the finest resin builds I ever did. And it's new connections, anti-aircraft, new type of gun, Type 44 or SMK 18. And it was just a really beautiful piece that I didn't want to take anything away from it. So what did I do? Beautiful, lot of exterior detail. Finish was just a Panzer gray type of finish, and I ended up just putting it on a black base. A little bit of figure for scale. Oh, that's better. Okay. So that's a good way to start. I mean, you know, hey, you can build something, you can just put it on a base, you don't need a figure, you can just put it on the base and display a lot of it. And that's a lot of times what you see. If you go to IPMS means this would be considered a diorama, right? But because if you just took the figure off, it'd just be just a display, armor display. Next. Now this one is, again, here, another simple little build. This is a terrible old plastic kit that was, I forget, RMP or something like that. And I ended up doing is I love open top vehicles because it's basically two vehicles. You know, you got the outside and then you got the inside. So this is a nice simple one. You'll notice that I minimize space. And this is probably one of the greatest challenges that new folks have in starting it. They always have way too much space on it. So here is where I had my black base and I actually had too little space. So I had to extend it with kind of like a little bridge or something. Okay, a figure here is, this is important, figure here is because of the scale. This thing is so tiny, is that you can't believe that two guys actually fit in this thing. Okay, next. And then here is another resin construction. It's a prototype and it was kind of a neat little thing. It's open top. I just basically gave it some height with this thing as the backdrop and just kind of, notice I put it at an angle. So here's examples, what I'm trying to show you guys in terms of your armor. Twist it, turn it, you know, you can do all sorts of things, just don't put it straight on the base. And try to think about a smaller base. If you start with a base, try to think about cutting it back, okay? You can always add to it like I did in the last one, but this has kind of got some interest to it because it's half hanging off, it's got the back end that's hanging off, and it's kind of like, okay, nice and compact. Next. Oh, now, also in armor, so we talked about, you know, the displays in terms of how you display it, but your finish is always really, really kind of cool and really good with armor. And a lot of people focus in on the current style, which is the chipping, the washes, and you know, the really dirty type of stuff. Well, early in my career, I kind of went after the more the Berlinen look, if you want to call that, which was very clean. And one of the things I remember is that a nice thing about a clean look is that you can really display some very interesting and intricate camouflage. And this is the Chardie, it's a resin kit. This is a block, basically, that's the block. And a turret in there. But what's nice about the French is, man, they have some pretty exotic patterns, right? So pick up a good French book that's got a lot of the different pre-war and early war patterns. And what you'll end up doing is you're adding another element to your display by, here's the block, interesting feature, right on the black, and oh, it's also very colorful. Okay. Next. This is again just a simple conversion where, you know, now your models are getting a little bit more complex. Why? Because this is a resin kit. I think they have a plastic kit out of it now, and then this is the plastic katushka. So basically married the two. Seen a lot of pictures of this, and I always thought it was an interesting piece.
Hey Dan, do you start out with a vision in your head, or is it just kind of develop as you go along with the model?
Well, when you're doing these early models, you pretty much pick that piece. So it's kind of like the early stuff that I talked about was, you know, the Chardie. I wanted to build those, so I wanted to paint that. The open tops, I just like open tops.
Right.
So what I end up doing is building the model first, but as you get the build going, then you start thinking about the display, right? So how big of the base you want to have, are you going to have anything with it, and et cetera. So then you kind of then start to build it into how that's going to work. Now this one is another conversion like the last. It's on a T26 chassis with a French PAC 50. Now the display I always had in mind, because like I said, remember I showed you the open tops, horizontal, open-ended, that type of thing. Here I wanted to kind of show off the display a little bit more, putting it on an angle like it's in some type of fire mission, where you're actually looking at, inside from this perspective, you're looking at the interior of the vehicle. So that was one thing. So again, here I had that in mind when I started. Second thing I had in mind was I wanted to do a conversion of something different. So we've all seen pictures of this in some of the magazines. You know, the Germans were just notorious for converting pieces to old pieces here, which is the T26, which they captured, and then a lot of captured French from the Western Front. And then, so it did that vertical. And then here is, this type of stuff is getting more into complex. So I could have stopped right here and it would have been perfect, right? But I was playing with the idea that, you know, I wanted to, and I'll show you on vegetation. I've never seen any modeler make a perfect tree. Trees are just sort of. The thing that you got to be careful about nature in terms of replication. Nature is perfect. You're an imitation. And so when you kind of study nature, the best way to do it is to try to approximate what you think is going on in nature in terms of the look and the feel and stuff like that. And if you can get it close, consider that a win. Okay? All right. Now this was an interesting. This is now what I call a two-tier display. Okay. So here's your resin block. The small figure, the vehicle is hanging off. This is a resin block, literally, before they came out with the plastic one. This was cool because it had really kind of interesting combination. It's kind of like the worst of both possible worlds of tracks and wheels at the same time. And what I found is that okay, so here's your platform here, and then here's another platform over here. So what I did is did the combination is that, okay, this is the vehicle piece of it, and then this is the figure piece of it. I could have put a figure down here, I could have put a figure somewhere, but I wanted to have a second kind of little vignette on top of this platform. Africa core, that type of thing. Oh, this is an old piece, something that I scratch built the turret, and what I love the open doors, so they got a kit out of this that's really nice, but the open doors are just gorgeous. You just want to look inside of it. And here's what you can do, is how you can orient your figures, how you can use your figures to draw attention to your model. So here's an example where the open doors, the figure doesn't have to be there, you just go around and look inside of it. But what's the first thing that you see when you look at that? You see the figure here. The figure is right next to the door. Oh, okay. So you look at the figure, and he's standing by the door, and you look inside there. So this is kind of, you can use your figure to draw attention to what you wanted to do. So you could put that figure over here, or you could put it someplace else, but this is what I wanted to see what it is. And this is...
I'm sorry.
No, it's just to show you that resin tracks don't always stay together when they're old.
Busted, 2 points off.
Yeah. All right, this one is again another resin build, and again figure placement, all right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to display your model in the best possible means, and figures are a way of doing that to show attention. So here is this massive tank over on this side, but it's got this long barrel, right? And I don't recommend short bases with long barrels. That's disaster, because you always get them caught, something like that. So what I ended up doing is extending the base, and what I did is I offset the massive vehicle here with a figure here underneath the barrel to just kind of balance the two.
Oh, that's cool.
All right. And then this is an old resin, and it is just simply put a massive model, right? And I mean, it's like this big, 35th scale, and it was an interesting build, but it was just one of those great howitzers, and this is before they came out with all the plastic kits and stuff like that. Again, I'm showing you my age in terms of how long I've been building it. And the note here is I had some slate. I could have put it on brick. I could have put it on ground. I could have put it on something. But what I did is I chose something different, which was, hey, let's just go ahead and put it on a slate base, which kind of looks pretty cool. And another thing that I start to do is I start to annotate with, if you ever go to the military shows and stuff like that, you can go and you can find a lot of fiddly bits, little pins and things like that, that can be a nice little artistic display of, well, what is this? Okay, you don't have to have that down there, but you see the star, hammer, and sickle. Oh, it's Russian. Okay, so that's something that you can also add to dress up your base. The base could be just simple black like that. You can have lettering. You can have this. Nice thing about black is anything you put on it, boom, you know, pops right out. Okay?
Hey Dan,
Mhm.
I noticed that in virtually all the single figure things, there's a contact between the figure and the thing, like here his hands on it,
Mhm.
the elbow on it. Is there conscious reasoning with that? Very few of them do you have the figure actually standing separate.
Yeah, and again, this is, and I'm going to talk further about this, but this is, so you had that one figure with the, on the Hetzer base where it was offset. It was just standing there. Okay, that's a detached figure. It's there for scale, it's there for something for balance. But you can start to put it closer in where you got like this, is what I call interaction. It's an interaction between the figure and the howitzer. So when you look at that, what are you seeing? You're seeing the combination of a figure with an artillery piece. You can't divorce the two. So that's kind of, now, when you do that, you have to get it right. What does that mean? That means you just like, here's the chair, I can't have the hand hanging out there, you know, so you anatomically, you have to position the figure in such a way that it makes sense that it's there. And second thing, is it in the right place? It doesn't look well in that. That's not me. Does it look okay sitting in that? And so that's kind of where I had this guy, his arm was down. It was a stock figure, he's holding a gun, and the arm was down, and I decided, well, okay, I just can't have the arm down, so I wanted to bring it up and put it on. Okay. This is another interaction piece where it's basically an active. This here is the base. That's the crim shield tie pin and winter scene, and you have the Nebelwerfer. You could have left it just at that, okay? But what I ended up doing was having a figure that kind of demonstrates the humongous size of these shells that they were. And it's kind of like loading it, and he's kind of looking right at you and going, okay, so I have the piece over here, I have the piece here, right? So they're kind of parallel to each other, offsetting it, balanced. But what is it doing? It's shoving the shell. So there's a connection between the figure and the armor piece. Alrighty. Now we get into, again, what I call more complex pieces. And so we all saw the vehicles and artillery pieces with a good build. You know, just a straight up nice build. I do dry brushing, I do oils, and I do, you know, just really basic stuff. I'm not an exotic builder. And so what here is just take, you know, your SIG 33 gun, and what I ended up doing was, and this is the classic picture. I know everybody's seen this. The poor guy, the artillery guy, after Kursk, he's just got his head in his hands, and he's just kind of sitting there amidst this debris of war. And so this is what this was an attempt to do. And then if you notice that there's that figure, and then there's this guy, you know. So I added a second figure is to represent, you know, a gun crew. Again here, the way the figure is part of the groundwork. If you don't look closely, it's kind of like you miss it,
right?
You know, because he's kind of flattened in there. This one didn't work well. I mean, it was one of those things. I thought it was a great little piece. People didn't like it. Okay. Now, you want to destroy something? Turn it upside down. You know, so here's an example of, again here, a nice sweeping. Look at how sweeping this is. You know, nice arc to that, but in terms of the composition, boom, goes up. And what you do is you got your figures on top, which are the ski guys that are coming down and checking out what the hell is this. So it's an upside down 150. And it's kind of fell off a road, who knows what happened to it. But there's an interesting story on this thing, is that I was building this, it's a metal piece, Hensel, whatever, Hensel cliff or something like that, and I dropped it. It's a big metal block, and it just like, so it was busted. And then I was kicking myself. But all of that type of stuff, I'm looking at it going, yeah, it's not that bad upside down. And then that's where that kicked me. Cool. Sometimes you got to really just be attentive to your ideas and the things that present itself. You know,
just go with karma.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. For every picture that I got like 10 pictures that didn't.
Right.
All right. This is one of my favorites. And this is the what I won the amps master for. And it's just a nice little tight composition. Boom, boom. It's an Italian model Victoria resin of the tankette. And you know, there's so many great interiors that people we have available today. But the challenge of the interiors is how do you display that? Yeah, and a lot of times, so you got, you know, a portal here and a door here, and you can pop up the engines over there, but you're missing about half of what you put into that. All right, so again, looking at photo documentation, I love it. It's just, I get lots of ideas. That's why I got so many books, that I get so many ideas that I extract. So you got a lot of maintenance in Africa, and so you got this A-frame coming up here in a very tight space. And when I figured out I didn't do my engineering correctly, when I first did this, this was going to be flat, and I couldn't get this thing high enough. So I had to dig down. So it's kind of like the old version of don't raise the bridge, lower the river, right? Again, so you sit there and you're thinking about, I had this idea, but in the execution stage, you got to be ready to be flexible, stuff like that. Does it make sense? Yeah, in a sense that here's the bottom of the tank. You got another level here for the figures, then you got the third level for the turret. So you always want to start, so here's what I'm telling you guys, is in terms of getting more complex, now you're working the vertical. So you're working the vertical dimension, okay? And that's very important that you're going to see in a lot of the pieces here. You've taken advantage of all the space on the platform, but now you're going up. Again, nice complex little piece, but it's basically really simple. It's the lead recovery vehicle and in transit with a, was it Delaware? Dingo. Dingo. Yeah. Thank you. Dingo and open top, interior, guy reading a newspaper. Okay? And then this is another picture of it. It was a pretty complex piece. I took this to World Expo, and I got a gold for this thing. And so you got the interior in here. Yeah. I popped off and here's some little fiddly bit stuff. So I popped off the engine here, and notice here, there's the engine. So it's kind of like the engine on that. So I wanted to display the engine, but you got to make sense of this thing too from their perspective. I mean, they just don't throw it away. I mean, they put it someplace. So I worked it in, an extra tire, so there's some connection between, there's a tire missing there, tires here, and engine there. Okay. Alrighty. Now, this is, I know you guys are all purists, and you're arbor guys, and you're going to hate this. And it is a concept that I had so many books. I wanted to do some bookends. How do I do a bookend? Well, I tried it the traditional way of putting it on a stand, putting it in, and it just didn't work for me. So what I ended up doing is saying, okay, why don't I just inset the vehicle inside? So inside here is the bottom of the tank. There's no tracks, obviously. And when you look inside the interior, the whole interior is in there, right? So this was a concept in what I call the early development. Next slide. And this is again it was a plastic kit with a Commander version to it, and it's a build just like anything else. But what you do is the design, the engineering of it is that the base sits inside this black base, so it's like inside a box, and then you got the tracks sitting on the outside. And then you have a full interior. Oops. And then this is the later development. So what this means was I didn't like just these two. Didn't work well enough for me. So I wanted to go ahead and continue to add to this. So this is basically what I call it is, here's your Panzer I, and here is a series or a collection of Panzer I's through time. So here is the nameplate, and when you go on the front here, you have the actual feeder. So you got Poland in through here, and you got France here, you got Eastern Front, and then you've got Berlin in here. So the evolution of the Panzer I, which is basically what this is trying to say, is that they use this bloody little chassis with so many different variants. So here's the communications, the PAC 47 on the Eastern Front, the SIG, and then finally the Stug for Berlin. And if you like this, you can go see it. I brought it today and put it in the Masters category.
Oh, cool.
Now, I can just wait to hear from my fellow Masters guys going, Dan, you ignorant dummy. You screwed up all the tracks. Anyway, it's a concept, it's something, and that's kind of what I want to do is challenge you. You always got to challenge yourself with saying, hey, I can put these on bases, I can do this and do that, but so what? I mean, everybody can do that. I can do something better, something different. Sometimes the concepts work, sometimes they don't, but you got to always be thinking to try to do something a little bit different, all right?
So you're not building for a gold medal, you're building your best for a new idea. And all of the award business aside.
That's, yeah. I mean, what I have a saying. I'm in my 60s, and the older I get, the less I care about what people think, and I have a lot more fun. And so this type of thing for me is a keeper. I have a lot of pieces that I sell, people buy, etc. And I've had lots of people, big collectors, want to buy this thing. And I just say, no, that's one of mine. That's something that the concept worked out well.
Right.
I enjoyed it. It won me the Masters in Atlanta, and I didn't build it for that. I built it for myself. So here is where you can kind of see the interior. Also, you can start to paint, like this is the late war piece. You can start to play with the primer, kind of offsetting colors, the barrel inside. As anybody who knows me, I love fiddly bits, and so you'll see all sorts of little fiddly bits, so that kind of like this is a poster. You got all sorts of stuff here. I love adding those little details. To me, that's fun. And then here is that. You see that? Go back. See that? The cutout, and then go back one more.
One more.
And you see how these things are tucked actually inside or right adjacent to the piece. So all of a sudden it looks like this is one piece and this is one piece. And the reason is that they're geometrically embedded in that. So when you go to the next piece, you see there's a cutout, right? That's where the big piece fits inside of it.
Right.
It's again an engineering aspect. When you look at it on the table, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay? Cool. This one I had the most fun with is the interior with the radios and all sorts of good stuff in there. Okay? Now, also, again here, when you start talking about destroyed tanks and stuff like that, link-to-link tracks work wonders. I mean, we struggle to get them together, to sag and sit right and
straight.
All straight and all of that stuff. Well, if you ever just wanted to do something that looked like a string of tracks that have kind of flowed, and that's what these things do. They're links and they flow. If you look at pictures, they look like they're just very fluid. And so if you're ever doing a destroyed something or other, use a link-to-link track. Also, when you talk about destroyed stuff, this is plate armor. And so I was experimenting with the different techniques of how to do burnt, explosion, so this is a piece that I did. You go ahead and you finish it the same way you finish it with the streaks and all of that stuff, and then you just kind of work on this section. So the road wheels are turned out, the hammer is broken, tracks are buggered up, and then you have this big white red explosion that kind of hit it. And then you wonder what happened here is where this vehicle fits, it's upside down. So things are pouring out of it, right? So when you build it like that, that's normal, ground. But I for where it was going to be in the diorama, it was upside down. So all the stuff has to be pouring out of that open top. Little details like that. Okay. And then here's another crushed piece. I mean, this is a horse that just got flattened. Okay. All right. So that was all on armor. That was the biggest chunk of it. Now we're going to quickly go through the figures and what does the figure show us. So in figures, again, you can start with a simple stock figure, which is these are 2 stock figures on a nice wood base. You're done. Okay, it doesn't do anything more than just shows you what the artist wanted to do on the figure. Okay. Same thing. You can get a little bit more complex bases by bringing in, you know, little fiddly bits and armor pieces and display stuff on a very small base. But it just kind of like here, nice triangle. This one, the U-boat guy kind of waving goodbye to somebody as they leave. Okay. Then you can get into a little bit more complex, and then this gets into the vegetation. So what I would suggest is that before you tackle a big vignette or vegetation or big diorama, you play around with just a simple little figure with some vegetation. So you can kind of experiment, because you don't have to do a lot. You just do enough that doesn't make sense. So here's an example of where you've adapted the figure, which is stock. This is a Soviet scout, a helo, and then he is in snow coming out of the woods, birch trees. Okay, all right. Makes sense that everything kind of flows together well.
Sorry.
And then this guy is, I spent a lot of time on his SS palm. It's the palm pattern, very complex on the shoulders, but it had this really distinct pink to it. You know, when you look at the palm pattern, it's got this really strong pink to it. And I go, oh, I'll just stick them inside sunflowers, which do have a variety of pink. So the idea here is the camouflage. The camouflage is now blending into the setting. Okay. Natural settings, rock. I'm a geologist, so I love doing rocks.
That's cool.
And buildings. And you can get these are stock. This is, you can get a mold from the railroads, throw some plaster on it, chop it up, and there's a nice backdrop for SS. Building, Berlin, or I forget who. Next. Now you get into a little bit of more storylines, what I call storylines related to your figures. Remember, the first part is simple stock. Guy standing there, whatever the sculptor intended, that's what you got. So now you're taking the sculptor basically had this view. This is a stock figure, and he's looking off to one side. So I gave him something to look at. And then this one is like Comrade at Arms, where he's just kind of walking by a grave of one of the soldiers. And this one is kind of cute. Is that this is a Soviet figure, same thing, standing there, looking at something. I gave him a pack 36 to look at. All right. Figures more. Here's the base. What I did is I gave him a little platform, like he's standing on a second floor looking out a window or a destroyed wall. You know? So I elevated the base up. And then this guy is a typical dugout. How many pictures you see with these guys in the dugout? So I just basically tucked it in. Again, the more complex is that it frames your figure. Okay? And that's important because when you get into the vignettes, this is where you're going. Okay?
What scale are
All these are all 35th scale. And then complex interaction figures. So this was one figure, a dead para. This is another figure, the guy running. So you just put the two together. Okay. And again here, this was a cute piece, is that I called it Blitzkrieg 1945. You know, pack in a wheelbarrow. And then here is something interesting where you can actually, you know, you don't, this is a Panzer III converted to 76i gun, and I had this figure, and he's a gorgeous little figure, SS figure, but he was kind of bent over, you know, so I don't know what the author was thinking, the sculptor was thinking, but he was just kind of bent over, and so, you know, it's kind of, so I had to search for so many things. What can I do? Didn't want to change it because I thought it was interesting. And then I came across this where you basically tuck it, because this had a high superstructure, and then there's the chassis, or the over here. And so he tucks right in here, but you didn't need the whole vehicle. So I chopped it off. And, you know, so it's got a lot of height to it here. And then he's tucked in the side. you know, and it kind of gelled, okay? Another piece where I had a leftover, I did some chop jobs on a Cromwell, and I had a leftover turret, and so I just decided to put him on top of that. And then here you can see this is another resin, all my old resin stuff ends up as stuff like this, you know. So I basically chopped it into a triangle, put it on a base, and you got the camo. Italian camo is tough to paint. That color that they have, that bluish field gray. Oof. I've seen so many people. I can't do it. I really, I look at the pictures. It's really hard. Okay. Then here, your interaction. So this is one of my chop jobs. I call it the tale of two Panzers. This is the back end, and I have the front end of it. And what I ended up doing is thinking, again, always thinking of okay, I build the tank up straight up, but you got guys who are using space. So I took the engine out, put a figure in, so he's in the bottom. You got this guy sitting right here, who's intermediate, and then you got this guy standing. So all of a sudden, the interaction of the figures is at different levels, and it's all over the base, right? You don't lose, you see everything, you know, the fuel tanks, the fans, etc. The guy's holding a piece, there's plumbing in there. So it's kind of like you're not losing anything from the vehicle. All you're doing is displacing some of the mechanical stuff with people stuff, okay? This is a nice little one where, you know, a lot of times tank riders, these are all stock figures, I think wolf figures, and this was an old plastic little kid. Okay? Okay, questions on that? Okay, we talked about armor, we talked about figures, now we're going to do the combos, right? Vignettes. Vignettes, to me, some people call them, what does Chris call them? Wedges. Wedges.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know. Okay, wedgie reminds me of what I got in high school. So what I like to do is take more of an artistic approach, and they call it vignettes. And so here's an example of that vignette. This is the front of a train chopped off. This is a maxim gun and a very small base. Boom. Nice little wedgie, nice compact interaction between your vehicle, your figure, and what some action is going on. This is the front of the train. So they had these things on the front of the train. Okay.
And you scratch built all that train?
Yeah, you know, it's easy to do. You get some train books. I mean, today there's just so much information out there. You can do just about anything. And this is a lot simpler than it looks. I mean, that's from railroad, you know, you go to railroad stores. That's just, you know, a cup that I put plastic on, and then that's just a backing. Okay. And then this is a cute one. Is again using your for a vignette, you're using your armor base, at least the front of it, and your figure, and you're just putting them together. Use it as a platform. There are pictures of him and this is the figure that they always. It's a beautiful figure. I think it's Andrea, and they always see him on the balcony. You know, he's always on the balcony addressing the crowd. So in this one, it's kind of the same way. He's addressing the troops. So you just scratch build a little platform, give him a ladder, give him a microphone, and he's all set. Okay. Again, here this is common stuff. It's just a wagon with a field kitchen. But the important thing here is the wagon got broken down in snow. You could leave it at that. What you ended up doing is showing you the human context of the brutal winter and being isolated out in the elements. I also refer to this as the winter of 2012 in Chicago, polar vortex winter. Again, another platform, simple platform here. Again, anything that you got with just straight tops, you know, you know, that's a perfect place to put figures. Again, a bailout. This is a stock group, leaning on it. I took some liberties. This is where I kind of started to develop my idea with the Panzer ones of having, you know, the base with the tracks kind of tucked in, and you don't see all the logos. So this is where I first started. Okay, guys walking by, little whatever that is, board. Okay, this is the other piece to the Tale of Two Tigers. This is the front end.
Oh.
And again, here you can see I'm really kind of experimenting with the tracks and the base. So what you saw in terms of the bookends was the end. These are pieces where I actually tried it. So this is where you got to kind of you know, take a little chance and try to do something different. So I did that, and then here I want to show you. I could have chosen a lot of different figures for here, but I wanted to show you two levels: one vertical guy and one horizontal guy. So he's kind of sitting. Makes sense, they're two, a driver and a commander, standing. But what's more interesting, what is interesting about this is the fact that you varied your height of the figures. So it makes the whole vehicle look more interesting, okay? We saw that already. This is one of my favorites. This is an example where it all came together. I mean, I am just amazed that this looks as good as it does. I mean, you got active figures tucked in here. You got a resin, this is the old resin kit. You got a rail car. Look at the angles. You got this thing sliding down this way, pointing up that way. You got the car shooting up that way. You got these guys tucked into the corner doing something off-scene here, partisans type of thing. So this is one that I have, this is the closest I've ever come to a perfect little vignette. And it's very compact and very small. This is another keeper. Oh, and don't forget humor.
Yeah.
Humor is hard, but it's there. I mean, you can. This is the little tri-bike figures in it. They got a mule that's been, you know, hauling this gun, and it's just kind of doesn't want to go any farther, and so they're enticing it with a carrot.
That's great.
Okay. All right. So that's vignettes. Okay. So now you saw how the figures in the vehicle came together. A little bit more elaborate groundwork in place, corrective placement and angles. Now we're into the big stuff. The big stuff is harder. This is the toughest part of, I think, in our whole hobby. But I'm biased. So let me give you a little tip on dioramas. The most stable geometric form in the world today, in physics today, is the triangle. And why is that? The triangle is something that draws your attention to it, a grouping. So you got the base here, you got two figures that anchor at the bottom, and then you got the top. So when you get into, when the large guys always kind of think about, in small vignettes, it's not big enough to do a triangle. But when you get into the large guys, you know, you got to have some focus. And what is a triangle? It's the focus of your attention. So this goes up here. This becomes nothing more than a platform. The angle really adds some kind of dimension to it. The action is very specific. Guy pounding on a machine gun, stuffing a grenade. Guy's got a landmine that he's going to put on top. Guy coming up here and a dead guy over here. So this is kind of one of those that the triangle dominates. And this is where you do have to have that concept. So you have to understand how this is going to fit, how the figures are going to go, and I had to position them. I had this guy down here for a while, I had this guy over here, and then I finally brought him up top. You can play with them. So when you build your vehicle and you put it in your base, good. Then you start doing your figures, so you know you had so many figures, 5, so you work on your triangle first, and so you just position your figures, you know, just not even finished figures, just do a plastic figure and just kind of, I think I used, you know, a US figure just kind of standing up here and there, and just see how it looks, okay? Second thing is don't get married to it right off the beginning, all right? So a lot of times I'll put little kind of blue tack on this, and I say, okay, that looks okay. Then I walk away, I leave it. Then I end up going and say, okay, come back to it. Oh, that doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So you leave it for a couple days and keep looking at it, okay?
There's a lot of figure work on
Yeah, this was.
Modifying legs.
Yeah. So this is when you had to convert a bunch of figures and sculpt some things, you know, guys hanging out. These weren't stock figures, with the exception of this one. I think that one is. Okay. Again here, using space. So here is a Samavete 120, blown up. So you got a lot of wheels, and you got the bailout of the crew. Okay. This is my latest piece that I took to World Expo. And again here, it's kind of like, here is the overarching direction, movement in that direction. What is it going over? It's going over a trench scene. I had it here last year, or 2 years, was it last year?
It was last year.
Yeah, last year. And going over a fascine field with the Germans in it.
That's cool.
It's depicting movement and figure interaction. Again, big, very complex. Again, here is just, now you're starting to see the use of vertical space. In a small, compact figure diorama or armor diorama, I'm not spreading out like a lot of guys do. I'm kind of building up. Okay? Here again, vertical. So if you laid this tank out, you know, it would be a lot bigger than this base, but I use the vertical space. It's free. Okay? And this is the triangle again. Is like, here's your triangle of figures, and this is just a pack of figures. It's basically, they're sitting on a Panzer III. It's sitting on a Panzer III. You can hardly see the tank because of all the figures. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to have a figure diorama on a vehicle where it was dominantly figures and armor was secondary. Next. And then here is, again, another armor pack piece. And you don't need the whole vehicle. So here is what you're seeing is I see another retreat where these guys are just sitting on whatever was pulling them. And SWS sitting in the back with a field kitchen. And that's all you need to see. So if I added the rest of that vehicle, it'd be secondary, you know, and it would have expanded my base way too big. So this is more of a flow, okay? And as everybody who knows me, I love fiddly bits. And fiddly bits is something that you gotta go crazy over. But this is one where, you know, you just try different things. So what I do is I know I had this figure, and I know I had this field kitchen. That's all I had. And now what did I need? Well, I needed to have rations, you know. I needed to have ammo for the pack, and I needed to have personal equipment. And so you start making up, painting all of that stuff. And then you take with the tweezers and you just kind of start putting things in some certain places. And some of them work and a lot of them don't. But at the end of the day, you'll end up finding what does work. And so it's kind of got that nice compact feel, but it's disorganized. So here's an example for another tip on fiddly bits, is so many people just kind of throw it down. You know, they put it on the floor, a shell or a pack or something, they'll put it on the floor. Put it with a collection of stuff, all right? So one canteen looks better if it's with a bread bag and some empty machine pistol ammo cards. You know, it just looks more natural that way, at least in my opinion. Okay. Now this is one diorama, and I'm going to show you the pieces of the diorama, and I'm going to show you 4 parts, and then you figure out what it is. So this is one view of the diorama. I'm not going to talk about it, other than here's the guy. He's the kind of the central figure, a little boy with a dog. Okay, next. Here's another perspective of that diorama. And you kind of go, whoa, what, you know, so this is where you kind of starting to go, what is this? How is it related? So this is kind of like the back end, okay? And there's a dozer tractor, and there's something going on there. There's that boy and the dog, okay? Next up is what's a dozer doing, et cetera, on the top. Okay, it's bulldozing this. What is this? It's a French conversion with an anti-aircraft gun. French Empire. Then the fourth piece is the front. So this is the front. And now you start to see there's the figure, so that's your, you know, your point of reference, and you have this big ravine, and you got the dozer, which is pushing the vehicles, this active vehicle into it. It had pushed all of this stuff. So you remember the crushed vehicle, the horse is down at the bottom, the upside down 251 there, you know, with the blown out side, and then this thing is coming to toppling down. Okay. This did not work. Too complex, too distracting. Every show I took it to, everybody couldn't understand it, hated it.
You're ahead of your time, man.
It's like one of those things. I kind of wanted to try something, but it was too ambitious, it was too complex, and I didn't have the proper execution. So, you know, I'm my worst critic, because I will always try stuff, but it doesn't always work. And when it does work, it's kind of like, all right, you know, like a success was trying it on one little vignette with the tracks hidden,
right,
all the way up to the bookends. Okay.
I just have a question. What material do you use for this, the vertical sides?
Oh, I just use this is surprisingly light, and what I just do is styrofoam. Lovely slicing it, dicing it. Like here is the side of the cliff. It's basically an alluvial fan with some different textures in there. This is an example of trying to add lots of different vegetation, trees, broken trees, stuff like that. But this thing is all just styrofoam, and then I take sheet plastic and I face it, and then I seal it off in black. And it's very good to travel, so when I travel with these things, they're nice and light. You can build a case for them, put them in there. And it also, with TSA, plastic is invisible, so it doesn't look like there's anything there, lurking in there. Yes?
If you're doing a large diorama, is it a good or bad idea to have, say, 2 or 3 little stories on that diorama?
I don't recommend that, is because you always got to have a dominant story, right? And that, I would rather have that dominant story with all of those figures interacting with that focus, because that kind of gives the author, or gives the audience, something that they can grab onto. Because then what happens is like in this one, is that you have the focus over here, which is a boy looking at what's going on. You got this guy over here, which is pushing in, which is related to it. And then you got all of this stuff down here. There wasn't enough connectors between those 3. People saw, that's why I showed you the different pictures, people saw different pieces of this thing, and they mentally couldn't connect it to it. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do that. It just means it's going to be tougher and harder for you. You have to work harder on how to connect the piece down here to the piece up here, right? And play with it, experiment. That's what I'm saying is that, you know, when you're doing your layouts and, you know, doing your figures and your armor is you know, just use stock figures to try to think about that until you kind of see if it gets there. Okay? Now, so just to wrap up, you know, again, I started with a 4-time master, so I'm just going to show you the award pieces I got. This was when I got from the MMSI, the Master Award. It's a bunch of figures. There's 7 figures in here. It's the inside of a boxcar. It's lit, and if you pop the top, you'll see all the fiddly bits and pieces.
Yeah, cool.
They're on the way. You know what that picture is from? Anybody see the original Stalingrad movie, the German Stalingrad movie?
Yeah.
There's a picture that they used to advertise it, and it's that picture of those guys looking out at the boxcar at the, you know, the Russian land as it was rolling by. This is the VLS MasterCon Award I got. Again, use of vertical space. Here is a Alpine howitzer. Here's one figure, and you can hardly see it, but there's another figure there, and then another figure here. So you got 3 guys that are all climbing up to this platform that were in the mountains. And then I had it just as this vertical block, and I would bring it around, and I go, it's so I decided to actually mount it in a picture frame, and it hangs vertically, so it can hang vertically. Cool. All right. This is the piece that wanted amps. And then next is the piece that wanted Atlanta. So those are my 4 master titles with the different models that go to the different clubs. Right? So, and the final piece is enjoy yourself. You know, have fun. Have fun at it, and just try, be creative, and try things. I am around, like I said, today, tomorrow. Stop by my bookseller's place, browse the books, ask any questions, or if you want me to come by and look at your pieces, if you got pieces, be happy to do that, and just give you some thoughts. And again, this is just my version of it, but thank you for your attention, and good luck and enjoy the show today.